All right, take it away, Karim.
Hi, so my name is Karim, and today we are gonna talk about Redux versus Recoil. As we know, both are state management library for React. So before starting, a brief intro about myself. So I'm a React Native developer at Scope IT Consulting, and I'm pursuing my master's in business analytics from Mercer Atlanta. Passionate about building web and mobile applications using JavaScript frameworks, and I have some production level experience on backend side using Node.js. So for today, the agenda would be to just dive into both these libraries and compare the data flow between those. What are the pros and cons between them, and what are the key differences? We would jump into the code as well to see how they are differentiate between on the code level. So first, let's understand like what is Redux and how does it work. So basically, Redux is a container for JavaScript apps, and it stores your states and reducers. Those are combined into an store. So basically, the first thing is like we define the initial states of the reducers, and then we create an actions, which are the pure JavaScript objects, which tells our reducers to what to do. Then we have the reducers where we have our business logic. Then we have a store where we combine all of the reducers that are connected to our components in React. And then we have dispatch actions that tells that it triggers an actions from our component to our reducers. And finally, we have the update on the UI that tells us if something has changed in your reducers, just to re-render the uh, our component. So here's the data flow, like how the data flow works in Redux. So it's a unidirectional data flow, as we can see in the bottom. It's the UI. So if we are just pressing a button, that's triggers an action with the type and the payload, and it goes through event handler dispatch, and then in reducer we just update that value from 0 to 10. And once this has been updated, the state uh, we mutate our state in the reducer, and then it just re-renders our UI. So that's how the data flow work. It's a unidirectional, as we can see, it's going from here to here. So now let's talk about Recoil. So Recoil is a state management library which is created by Facebook 3 years back, and it is much simpler than Redux, I would say. So it comes with only two main functionality, which is atoms and selectors. As compared to the Redux, we have seen we have to do a lot of boilerplate code in order to achieve the functionality. So what are atoms? So atoms are just basically the unit of states in your application, and we just subscribe those atoms to our component. So once we change a value of any atom, your component which is subscribed to that atom will just re-render it. And then the selectors are the pure functions which are derived states from atoms. We will see a live example in a while, like how these atoms and selectors work. So right here we have some key differences between Recoil and Redux. So let's dive into some code and see how those looks on code level. So basically, are you able to see the code screen? My editor.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the first difference is like in Recoil we create atoms, which are the states, but in Redux we create those states into the reducers. So let's take a look here. So in Recoil, you can see we just create an atom right here, which is coming from Recoil.js, and it has the key, which should be unique for your state and a default value. But as compared to Redux, we we have to create a reducer for each component, and your reducer contains a different types of data. So that's the number one difference. The second difference is Recoil itself comes with selectors, but in Redux it doesn't comes with selectors. So we have to create your custom selectors within your reducer. So what are purely selectors are? It's just a value which is just derived from your state. So in Redux, you can just make selector like this. So it will just return your reducer state number. And how you gonna fetch in your component is like you can just do get number and pass your state and you will get the number. But as compared to Recoil, in Recoil, you have selector built in Recoil library. So what it does is it takes the key, which is the unique, and a get function from which you can just get a state of an atom, and then you can just uh, drive a new value from your selector. To better understand, let's run this code a bit. So give me a second. Okay, so as you can see, we have an input field here. So as we can type, right, we are driving this state from the atom that we have. So what's really happening behind the scene is like we have this name state, and once it's been changed, the component is listening to the selector of this value, and it's getting the value of this name state from this atom, and then just returning the length of it. So if you simply go into your component, you can really use recoil state, which is just a name state that you have just created here, and use recoil value, which is the selector that you have created here, which is returning the length of that input. So that's the second difference. And the third difference is firing in recoil. We fire an action using selector, as we have seen here. The action is firing using our selector here, but in Redux we have a pure function that fire that action. So what does it really means is if we go to our this app for Redux, so we have here a dispatch function which is firing an event, as compared to recoil, in which the selector is fired when the state has been changed. So that's the third one. In the fourth one, it's simply we can grab any atom value from our atoms and then just show that on the UI. So it's a less boilerplate. As you can see, we have just 2 lines of code. We can define atoms, our atoms, these anywhere in the code. It's easy to use, and we can just pass this shareable state across our app, as compared to Redux, where you have to where you have to have this boilerplate everywhere to connect, to pass your component to a connect function from the React Redux, and then use those things. So there is a downside of having a more boilerplate on the Redux side and less boilerplate code on Recoil. And the last is we for Recoil we wrap our root app into the Recoil root. But As compared to Redux, we just wrap in Redux Pro Edit. So let's have some, uh, what are the pros and cons of these library? So as we went through the code and we have seen that like Recoil is much easier to use and there is less boilerplate. So as compared to Redux, so Recoil is good if we wanna have some less boilerplate over there. Predictable state management. Both libraries offer predictable state management solution, but Recoils offers a more intuitive approach to the state management. Centralized versus decentralized. This is the main point I think is like in Redux we have to be more specific by defining our reducers and actions and all reducers needs to be tied into a great store. As compared to Recoil, we can define the atoms anywhere into our application. And one of the good example of the selector, how the selector would work is, let's say we have a to-do list application, right? And we can just create a selector here, say to-do list. The default value assigned to empty, right? And if this array changes, we have complete, incomplete, active, or delete. So we will have one selector over here in which we can just filter it out, complete, not complete, and delete. So this selector is just computing those numbers. Let's say we have 10 items and 5 are completed. And so it will just filter those 5 and return the number. So we can just show it on UI side. So the all business logic is on the selectors. So for Redux, it's more like we have to combine all the reducers in the one place. As compared to Recoil, we can write your atoms anywhere within the app. As performance is concerned, Recoil is designed to optimize performance, especially in large applications, as compared to Redux, which can be slower and suffer from performance issues if you don't use it in a right way. The learning curve for Redux is a steeper learning curve as compared to Recoil. Recoil is much simpler and easy to learn for beginners. And the last, which is Recoil doesn't support any middlewares now because it's just a new library and it's still evolving. So it doesn't have any middlewares as compared to Redux, such as Redux has Redux presses, Redux things for doing different kind of things. So I would say we should go for like we need to decide which one to go with. So if we are building a complex application, right, I would still say go for Redux because Recoil is still lacking on something. But if it's kind of 2-page or 3-page application, I would highly recommend Recoil to go with. Okay, and I think that's pretty much it. Any questions?
Karim,